The Cinema Museum is housed in what once was the Lambeth Workhouse. Built in the 19th century, it could accommodate 820 residents, uncaringly called inmates. A workhouse is where the homeless would come. It wasn't a completely charitable organisation, so in a building like this there would have been hard labour. The reason why the old Lambeth Workhouse has been chosen as today's Cinema Museum is because its most famous resident was Charlie Chaplin. The building behind is the old receiving building for new males, where Charlie, aged 7, and his brother Stepney were brought by their mother, who had become homeless largely due to her mental health issues. One day, those running the museum are hoping to be able to renovate this and turn it into a full-time Charlie Chaplin museum. In the entrance of the museum are these projectors, whose inventions led to film showing and the cinema. It's interesting to see the projectors work in pairs. On these two specifically, you can see a 1 and a 2 written on them, and each movie will have about 6 reels. It's the projectors that kind of give birth to the whole cinema experience across the world, but especially in London. These projectors were invented around 1895. Advancing machines that gave an illusion of moving images before, but these are the first kind of commercially available ones you were able to project to a large audience. In 1914 in London, there's like 500 cinemas, so only 20 years after they were invented, 500 different cinemas popped up across London. A lot of the cinemas then took over the old buildings of theatres and different entertainment that had existed previously, now had become redundant. So you had really beautiful Art Deco and Egyptian design for these to become quality picture palaces of cinema. Builder demolition teams were paid beer money by museum founder Martin Humphreys to turn a blind eye as old cinemas were dismantled. They would sweep in and they would grab as much stuff as they could. They would pull fixtures off the walls, they would rip out the seats, load them as many as they could into a van, and then take them and store them somewhere, because all this stuff was going to the junkyards if they didn't save it. So now obviously we appreciate it a little bit more, but in the 70s and in the 80s this was seen as something that had to be torn down for shopping malls to be sprung up instead, and over 5 years or more Martin saved as much of what you now see in the museum. Frankenstein classified as horrific for audiences of the time. It is really an important part of cinema history and film history as well, because it was then kind of taking classifications very important. With the wide range of movie genres today, ridiculous or nonsensical film classification ratings crop up frequently, leading to difficulty for the individual to know if the film they are about to watch will suit them. I'm thinking in a classification perspective. So on this door there is the map which shows the old blueprint of the museum. The only bit that remains of the original workhouse building is a yellow highlight, and the rest has been demolished. So it just gives you an idea of how vast the workhouse used to be. And this room would have been the meeting room of the workhouse. So this is where Charlie and his brother Sidney, the only place they could have seen their mother, Hannah. And the period of time that they spent here would have been when she came to visit them in this room. Cinema going was very popular in the 30s and 40s. So popular in fact that they would need these signs outside the cinema to let people know whether they were going to have to stand, whether there were seats available if they were lucky, or whether they would end up standing. Cinema was very inexpensive compared to your other entertainments. Today, when you compare it to major sporting events or music events, you can usually still find a cinema seat for under a tenner or less. Here they do screenings, sometimes for a £5 or £8 sometimes. So when you compare that to, the dynamic pricing of music events and stuff, it's a very affordable entertainment that is very accessible for a lot of people. And this kind of compares or translates the price from 1960 to the modern day. So in 1960, a cinema ticket was the equivalent to a pint of beer or fish and chips for two, or it was a 170th of your weekly average wage. And it was so popular in fact that in the 1930s a standard showing would consist of the main or a picture and then a supporting and shorter B-pick, which was then also surrounded by cartoons, trailers, adverts, and those are the kind of clips that you're going to see at the end of your tour when you visit the museum. The cinema screen is upstairs, and cinemas were so popular that they were showing at least twice a week, sometimes to keep up with demand. People would be visiting the cinema at least once a week, so they would be expecting something new to see each time. Cinema attendances peaked in 1946 with over 31 million visits per week, and this totaled over 1,612 million visits for the entire year. And just as a point of comparison, because those stats might not mean very much to us right now, and UK cinema admissions from the year 2024 totaled just 138 million for the whole year. So that's over 1,600 million in 1946 compared to 138 million in 2024. And if you think about the population increase we have today as well, that is a drastic difference and just shows how many people were going to the cinema in past generations. And this drastic difference also reflects the amount of cinema buildings there were. So, this map shows in the period of the late 1930s to early 1940s how many cinema buildings there were in this area. This is not even South London. This is the area around Kennington and Elephant and Castle only. This lady tour guide counted 44 cinema buildings in just this area of Kennington and the Elephant alone. They were literally on every street corner, so everyone had a local. That's a local cinema. The cinemas were ranging from your luxury silver screen palaces to your flea pits. Obviously the flea pit would be a little bit cheaper and maybe a little bit smellier, and the luxury palaces, which would be a bit more of a treat, a bit more of an experience. Around the 1940s there were, I think, over 4,000 cinema buildings across the country, and we know that is dramatically reduced today. So as you know, a lot of them have sadly been demolished because the demand just isn't there. Britain had 4,800 active cinema building sites in 1946, whereas in 2020, and so you know the pandemic didn't help, there was only about 800 surviving. So we've lost 4,000 of these cinemas. So 4,000 of these gorgeous buildings over 60 years, 70 years gone. So that's a huge decrease. A lot of the buildings, they may have got converted into a supermarket, or if you go back to where a lot of them are demolished in the 60s and the 70s, a lot of them made way for a bingo hall, and then they became a snooker hall, and then they became a nightclub. That's quite a familiar trajectory for them. In the early 2000s, many closed down and they were lying empty, waiting for the next developer. Charlie Chaplin, the great man and the most famous man in the world during his heyday. And this corridor is a gallery with lots of posters, stills and models of the man, whose image is frequently reproduced still even today. In the corner there's a bizarre looking monstrosity. This is a mercury arc rectifier, and this turns AC electrical current into DC, which was required for projectors to operate. They were very impressive looking things. They would have arcs of blue lights seeping through them, which made them perfect for background props in the 1931 Frankenstein, starring Boris Karloff.